Alright everyone, welcome back to Rebel Eaters Club. We are going to listen to part 2 of the third episode, which is titled Move and Eat for Fun, with Dr. Deb Burgard.
It can be as simple and neutral as that. All of this to say, dieting doesn't work. Some of us are just bigger, and restricting food might make our bodies smaller for a period of time, but by far most people who diet gain the weight back because their bodies want to be bigger. Because embedded in some of our genes is the lesson that bigger bodies are more likely to survive. We're going to talk more on that after the...
That's so stupid. I'm sorry, but somewhere embedded in our genes is the lesson that you need a bigger body to survive, or whatever the fuck she said. Like, no, that's not how anything works. That's not how this works.
After the break. We're back. Before the break, I was talking about how when most people diet, they gain the weight back because their bodies want to be the size they were, not the size they were dieting to achieve. And the reason why is embedded in our DNA.
People who are on the planet right now, at least if we look like, let's take the United States as an example, 2 out of 3 of us apparently had ancestry where people were able to be geniuses at making bodies out of too little fuel.
Yes.
Right? Because we're 2 out of 3 of us are maintaining these bigger bodies on the same basic intake, right?
Yes.
And so...
What in the fuck? What? I feel like I'm in the fucking Twilight Zone right now. It's like they completely ignore that the body is adaptable. The body is adaptable. I'm having such a hard time even verbalizing what's wrong with this statement. That's not how bodies work.
These people, these 1 in 3 people, they think they're the norm, but maybe their ancestry didn't include a bunch of famines.
Right.
Or as many or whatever. They had some other thing that they were good at. You know, they had some other trait that they were good at that people survived, right? Like, this is why biological diversity is good in a species. We have a lot of different challenges that we're facing. But, you know, when I think about how much the capacity to slow down your metabolism when you don't have enough food, or get a lot to eat when you have access to food, or store it instead of, you know, making it disappear in the form of heat or energy or movement or something, those things are kind of tossed off. And like we don't need that anymore.
Right.
And so we're like,
right.
What planet are you living on? Like this,
Yes.
You know, I don't think that's true at all. Like, we have this incredible uncertainty that we're looking at right now. And, you know, I think we're going to absolutely need these capacities. And they're not bugs. They are features.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I think that this is extraordinary, that this is magic, right?
It is. I just feel like there's such a simplification of what the magic stuff that our bodies really do, like the amount of strategies that our bodies have for all of this stuff and what we really don't know and how amazing it all is. And, you know, just trying to find a path, you know, for me, trying to find the path with somebody who's just, you know, got a little tiny ember because they're just almost gone from this disease. And, you know, that could be somebody at a higher weight too.
Right.
Could be anywhere on the weight spectrum, and trying to really help them feel like they deserve to be here. And they absolutely deserve to eat, and they deserve to get fatter, and they deserve to take up this space, and they're precious.
Do you see dieting as, like, whatever the average American considers a regular diet, do you see it as part of a spectrum of disordered eating? Do you see them as in different buckets? Or how do you conceptualize restriction behavior?
I think of it as a trained behavior that is a response to the accusation that you have been sinful in your eating. It goes back to the religious idea, I think.
Yeah.
You know, if you're fat and we don't like fat people, that means that you're not right with God. I think...
That's a lot to put on the perspective of not wanting to be fat. That's a loaded thing to put on it, and I'm sure to a degree there's some people that have that, like, religious connection, but not necessarily everyone. Also, like, they probably mention this at the beginning and I just missed it last week, but Dr. Deb Burgard is a psychologist, not health doctor. So I feel better about refuting her claim, trying to refute her claims now. It's just, also I understand that she's a psychologist, so she has more training in the DSM than I do. But isn't one of the qualifications for any sort of mental disorder is that it has to be negatively impacting someone's ability to function in everyday life? I don't like that there's a psychologist endorsing that. Something that to me seems to be within a normal range of a person's behavior is wrong. And perhaps it's hard because I understand that she has a greater degree of education in this field than I do, but there's just something about some of the things that she says that doesn't ring true to me, and seems like it's very, very heavily colored by her own personal opinion rather than her professional opinion.
The roots of all of this are the same oppression.
Yes.
And it hits people differently based on your privilege.
You are the first person who taught me that our relationship to food is metaphorical. For me, I think about my history of dieting and restricting and attempting to starve myself it was a lot of things. I mean, it was about trying to assimilate into an American ideal, an ideal of whiteness, but it was also, in many ways, an attempt to gain control over my experience of abuse, because the people, the fat phobes around me were saying, I will stop abusing you.
Yes.
And in fact, I mean, most of them were straight boys, right? I will, not only will I stop abusing you, I will then proceed to try to have sex with you if you just stop being fat.
I'll value you.
Yes. And I mean, I think there's this is often something I talk about where people, I mean, especially for me as like a fat girl, being taught fat phobia, I was learning that not only was something was wrong with my body, but also that the best thing that I could possibly get would be sexual desire from men. And for
Okay, but as we've been reading through Virgie's book, honestly, her taste in men was far beyond anything that was an issue for diet culture or fat phobia or whatever the fuck she wants to call it. She had like that guy that was 38 trying to impress someone 20 years his junior, saying that he liked it when she dressed like a teenager. She incorporated a bunch of like anti-diet culture rhetoric in that whole exchange of like, I was expected to not eat honey. This guy was trying to groom you. This guy was trying to control you in a variety of ways. There's so many issues with it, what Virgie says now that we've read her book, because one, there was some issues with the guys that she dated that were far outside of any of this, honestly, that you don't even want to apply social justice to, because there were so many issues just in the behavior of these people. Like, she was barely legal, and I think I'm curious if she knew this guy before she turned 18. Because there was some issue going on with that guy that had nothing to do with your fat acceptance, fat liberation movement. Number one. Number two, you say that, it was to appease men, and yet you equated this with a 4-year-old. There's an issue with Virgie of, one, taking things to an extreme. This whole thing of, we'll start picking on you when you fit my aesthetic ideal could definitely apply to some middle school and high school boys. I don't know about college. I'm not going to get into that realm. And like, I understand that, but then she will also apply that to very young children, that it is unreasonable to apply this lens to, I think. Number one. Number two, that was number two. Well, anyway, my point being that she is putting this lens of fat phobia and fat acceptance and fat liberation and what have you on situations in which there was other shit going on, and then she often tends to overgeneralize this framing that could potentially have like a kernel of truth in it, and she broadens it out and generalizes it so much that it's absurd. So when she talks about this stuff, I can't help but take it with a grain of salt, because she takes this stuff too far, and sometimes she misses giant neon red flags that are right in her face in the favor of furthering this anti-diet culture rhetoric.
For a lot of feminine people who are fat, that lesson comes together. There's sort of like one trauma, and it certainly explains a lot of my sexual history, because I literally felt no autonomy, right? Like, my understanding of safety was entirely tied up with masculine sexual approval. But anyway, but to kind of like get back to this, right? Like, there's no way
that whole thing, her concept of safety was tied up in masculine sexual approval. That I could actually see that. I don't think that had anything to do with your fat phobia, diet culture, fat acceptance, fat liberation, whatever you want to call it. I think there's something, I get the feeling that there is an aspect of Virgie's childhood that we've only seen peaks of, but there's something about it that's leading me to a deeper issue with Virgie, and I'm gonna finish the book that we're on now, go over one or two more things on her from her website, and then finish this Rebel Eaters Club stuff, and then we're gonna be done, because the more I get into Virgie, the more I'm getting the sense that her focus on diet culture and anti-patriarchy and fat phobia and all of that is a way to focus kind of on something. It's kind of like she wants to focus it on something she feels she can control. I gotta be honest, and I may be overstepping here, okay? And I recognize that I'm overstepping. I'm just starting to get these vibes given everything else that we've seen. Between that guy that was clearly grooming her, and did not mention red flags or any issue with that guy once in her book. The fact that she equated sexual interest from a 4-year-old. The fact that why she doesn't talk to her family anymore, there was some hint of sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse from her aunt showing her porn. I feel like there's probably some deep unresolved issue that's possibly sexual in nature from Virgie's childhood that she's not dealing with, and she is projecting it on to this fat liberation stuff. And it's starting to get to the point where, like, if I keep getting these vibes, I might stop the Rebel Eaters Club. We'll probably still finish her book because we don't have that much more to go. And the things that I'm looking at in her newsletter don't give me those vibes so much, but something that I'm getting a little bit more is that there's something, and again, this could just be armchair psychology and I'm overstepping and I recognize that, but I'm getting some vibes of unresolved childhood abuse that could be sexual in nature, or it could just be something else. And not in my dad put pictures of fat women on the refrigerator to remind us to not eat so much, or that I was forced to go on the Stairmaster or whatever for however long a night. Those could also be abusive in nature. I think that putting the fat woman and saying, you'll turn into this, that does seem a little psychologically abusive. The forcing her to exercise could have been abusive depending on how overzealous her family was about it, but I feel like it's something more. It's something less subtle than what she's presented so far, and that's her story, and I'm not looking to say, like, this definitely happened. I don't know. This is just a vibe I'm getting. If it continues down this road of these vibes that I'm getting from her, it starts to cross into a place that I'm not comfortable, like, continuing to review. Because the vibe isn't that strong, I'm going to keep going. But this over focus on sexuality, how she sexualizes food, there's getting the bigger picture of Virgie from a variety of sources. I'm getting some vibes from her of, this isn't just fat acceptance rhetoric. There's something else going on here, and she's using the fat acceptance rhetoric as a way to avoid dealing with the deeper issues. And I could be wrong. I want to be clear. I could be wrong. Like, I don't really like speculating about someone's life like this, which is another reason why if I keep getting this vibe, I might just cancel the Rebel Eaters Club thing, just because it's starting to feel like we're going into a more personal realm. But I don't know, there's just something about it that is starting to, like, make some connections in my head.
Way that what I ate was actually going to control my experience of abuse.
Ugh.
And yet I truly believed that on some level. And so I'm curious if you can kind of talk about the functionality of our relationship to this thing that we all need, that we engage with every single day.
Oh, you're just so smart.
Thank you.
Really, just such a pleasure to talk to you. they tell you what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have less power, when you're younger, when you have less privilege,
Yep.
you have to do it.
Right.
You feel like you have to do it. I talk to people a lot about, you had to do this thing and now you have to show yourself that you can do the opposite. And what does it look like after you've convinced yourself of that? Like, what's next? What is this really? That's the exciting thing to me.
Yes. I think about, for me, that moment of transition from hating my body and all that stuff, it didn't feel viable to hop over until I saw a femininity that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And that was when I was introduced to fat activism.
Wow.
And these were queer, fat, mostly women, femmes, and a lot of us are working class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that kind of bombastic, over the top, amazing femininity comes from the working class, comes from people of color. And so it was like this kind of thing where I was like, oh, I see myself in you and I can be this superlatively feminine person in my fat body. But it really was a hearkening back to my own past.
Yes.
On some level,
It's the connection with your actual magic in your
Yes.
ancestry, right?
Totally.
It's not a version of it that's been fed through white supremacy and burped out on the other side, right? When you are at these crises moments of divesting and kind of going, I'm not really going to do this.
Yes.
I guess I'm not going to do this. I don't want to fucking do this.
Yes.
You're sort of in a crisis because you're like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what does
Right.
this look like? Like, who am I? What do I pull forward in my awareness, in myself, in my history, in my culture, in my traditions, and the other people who I know in my community? What am I going to give energy to? What am I nurturing?
Right.
About this.
Yes. I mean, to go back to the concept of like leaving diet culture, which is major, right? And I think like one of the conversations that's emerging more and more is really, what are you giving up when you leave, right? Because you're giving up suffering and poo-poo garbage and like all this stuff that's like really trashy, but you're giving up what the poo-poo garbage represents, which is acceptance. And I really believe, Deb, that like we all like, and I think about, I have this relationship to my biological family, for instance, where I'm like, I know there's a lot of problems there, a lot, right? I know there's a lot of harm, and yet there's a part of me that will always want them to love me. There's a part of me that will always want their approval. And I think the truth is, we, as wherever we grow up, we have that relationship on some level to our culture.
Of course,
and so what does
yeah.
it look like to not only have the true sight of being like, wow, my dad is a horrible person, aka America. Like, my dad has a really violent past and I have hopes for him to recover, but I can't actively be like engaging in his delusions anymore. And then to sort of say, not only am I able to see that now, but I
See, like that. She didn't say my dad's a problematic asshole. She said violent, which is more than we got from the book. Yeah, I don't know. There's just some. This has been slowly emerging, so I want to watch at least one more episode over the next couple of weeks, or listen to one more episode over the next couple of weeks. But definitely, I'm just getting some vibes from her that there's some stuff that we haven't seen, and this is like her way of coping. I don't know, and that, like, to a certain extent, I understand what she's saying about, you still seek that approval, and I think a lot of people still seek approval of things way into their life, whether this is due to unresolved issues of acceptance from their family or what have you. I don't know. I think that our desire to be accepted and to do things can sometimes be motivation for good, and I don't think that like her diet culture rhetoric is the answer. I'm having a hard time though, because I'm really getting that this whole thing has been more of a coping mechanism for her than anything else, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm getting some vibes.
I actively have to step back from him, and I can't keep waiting on his approval. I remember the early days of leaving diet culture, and it was like dancing in the streets, and it was very celebratory. And then the sobering reality kind of a few years in, where I'm like, oh wow, that was a big decision.
And I think one of the reasons that there's such a giant schism right now is because, there's a bunch of other just perspectives and ways of being in the world that have come into the public square in such a beautiful and boisterous and magnificent, kind of way. And the existing culture of, middle-aged white guys, is kind of blown off the table. And then people feel like, I have no place in this next thing, or I have to fight for it to go back to what it was before. And when we kind of think about that in sort of abstract terms, but in some weird way, I think we're talking about a desperate feeling of, can I bridge the worlds with you? Can I bridge these worlds of who you are and who I am? Can you sort of stretch enough to know me, and know the ways that I'm different from you, and know the ways that what you're thinking is actually harming me, you know?
Yes.
I mean, this is brave territory.
So that's what you're thinking is harming me? Because, like, I don't know, like, can you go further into that? Are you talking about, like, I want to lose weight and that's harming you? Because no, it's not. I don't, that's a leap. That's a leap. That whole statement is a leap for me.
Territory.
Yes.
And I think that's what gives me some kind of hope, because I see people doing it,
Yes, absolutely. I guess this is a big one. If you could have a magic wand and fix some of the problems you see in your office, out in the world with diet culture, what would you do with this wand? What would change? How would people I guess to bring it back to food, how would people interact with food in this magical world where there aren't all of these intensely layered issues?
We would play. And,
Yes.
we would have so much more room for the satisfying aspects of creating and nurturing each other and being able to cherish that we're in these bodies. Part of this.
I don't know why this creeps me out so much, but it does. We would play, and we would. It's this weird change in her tone. It's creepy.
Opportunity to be in this spacesuit that is a human body.
Yes.
Is the experience that we have of something that's not you. You're going to take into your body.
Yes.
And it's going to become part of you.
Oh, yeah.
and that's.
I mean, there's that whole concept of something that isn't you and you take it into you and it becomes part of you can be like, you don't have to make it so literal with the food thing. You can do this with ideologies. You can do this with skills. You don't have the skill, but you observe the skill and you work and bring it into you and cultivate it, and it becomes part of you because it becomes a skill that doesn't go away. There's so much better things to equate this metaphor with. Like, the food is not the end-all be-all of existence.
That's just so intimate, right? And it's so amazing that we do it with each other.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but their phrasing is creepy to me.
Deb, it's been so amazing talking to you. Thank you.
It's been so good. Thanks, Virgie.
I think about my good friend's son, Atticus. I remember going out with the two of them when Addie was 1 year old. We were out shopping for incense and rose quartz, as one does, and he starts screaming at the top of his lungs. Turns out he was hungry. When we finally sat him down with a scrambled egg and buttery toast, he started bouncing in his high chair. He began to throw air kisses at everyone around him. That is how amazing it feels to feed our bodies.
No, the boy was hangry. Like, being hangry is like an actual thing. Where, yes, you should eat if you're really hungry. Because it can affect mood. Like, to a degree that is true, but that doesn't mean that food is magical. That doesn't mean food is the end-all be-all of existence. The boy was hangry. You fed him. Like...
Eating gives us pleasure. It makes us dance in public. Why wouldn't we play with food? Why wouldn't we celebrate the way it puts us around a table with the people we love most? It gives us life.
Okay, but so everything that you're saying here, though, it's something to use to celebrate. It's not, food itself isn't something to celebrate, but it is a tool for celebration with those that you love. The food is inconsequential to the experience. It just enhances the experience. Does that make sense? Like, it can be used to enhance certain experiences. The way popcorn can enhance a movie watching experience, but you don't have to have the popcorn to enjoy the movie.
So for this week's journal prompt, I'm thinking of that image of Deb at the conference, hula hooping. What if we all stopped thinking of food as diet? What if movement didn't just mean exercise? What if food and movement were just things we do for pleasure, for fun? What would look different in your life if fun was the goal?
If fun was the goal, then I just wouldn't work. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike my job or anything, but like, if I never had to go, if I had been the one to win that $1 billion Mega Millions thing, I would never work again a day in my life. But if fun is the goal, I wouldn't change anything really in my life. I have fun. I have fun exploring different hobbies. Food I don't need to have my favorite chocolate bar every day in order for my life to be fun. I don't need to eat until I am incredibly full for it to be fun. Like, I really wouldn't change much in my life if fun were the ultimate goal. And quite frankly, anything that I would change would just have a negative effect because it's like chores around the house that I do to keep my space livable. Like, if fun is the only goal, then I would let those things sit for far too long. But I take care of them because it makes my living situation better throughout the week. Go ahead and respond to that because I'd love to hear your comments on it. We're going to leave it there. But this whole thing, one, I'm getting some serious vibes from Virgie that this whole fat acceptance, fat liberation thing is a focus for her to avoid something else. And again, I realize that I may be overstepping and I may be completely off the mark, but I'd love to hear your opinions on that and your opinions on this episode of the Rebel Eaters Club. Like, it's just, I did not care for Deb Burgard at all. And I feel like sometimes they take this whole thing, I think they glorify food entirely too much. Food is a tool. It is not a form of entertainment. And I don't think it should be. And I know that they view food as a form of entertainment, and I think that is an issue and not healthy. But that's me. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you next time.